You go to bed tonight like you always do. You lie down, maybe your mind is still busy replaying conversations, planning tomorrow, or wandering through random thoughts. Then slowly, almost without noticing the exact moment, everything begins to fade. The room is still there. Your body is still there, but your connection to it starts slipping away. Now here's the strange part. It feels like you're turning off, but you're not. We often talk about sleep as if it's a simple switch. You're awake, then you're not, and then you wake up again, like flipping a light on and off. But that's a comforting illusion, not reality. Biology rarely works in clean, sharp transitions. Instead, it works in layers like overlapping waves. As you fall asleep, your brain doesn't suddenly shut down. There is no exact second where you disappear. What actually happens is more subtle. Different parts of your brain begin to change their activity levels at different times. Some regions quiet down, especially the ones responsible for focused thinking and decision making. Others remain active, even become more active in certain patterns. So instead of a shutdown, what you're experiencing is a reorganization. A better way to understand this is to imagine your mind as a large city. During the day, it's full of noise and movement. Cars are everywhere. People are talking. Decisions are being made constantly. It's chaotic, but organized chaos. That's your waking mind handling input from your senses, making sense of the world, reacting, choosing, thinking. When night comes, the city doesn't vanish. It doesn't get switched off. It changes purpose. The traffic disappears. The noise drops, offices close. But something else begins. Maintenance crews come out. Systems are checked. Roads are repaired. Data is processed. The city becomes quieter, but in some ways more focused. Sleep is like that. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. You're lying still, eyes closed, disconnected from the world. But internally, a different kind of activity takes over. The brain is not resting in the way we usually imagine rest. It is shifting from interacting with the outside world to working on itself. And here's something even more subtle. The feeling that you are going to sleep is itself part of the process. It's not something separate. The fading awareness, the drifting thoughts, the loss of control over your thinking, these are signs that the systems responsible for maintaining a stable sense of self are loosening their grip. It's almost as if the mind is gently letting go of reality, but not completely, not all at once. That's why in those final moments before sleep, your thoughts can become strange. They stop following strict logic. They jump, blur, mix together. You might imagine things that don't quite make sense, but you don't question them. That's because the part of your brain that normally checks for consistency is already stepping back. So instead of asking, when do you fall asleep, a more accurate question would be, at what point does your mind stop holding reality together? And the honest answer is we don't know exactly, because sleep is not a clean break. It's a gradual slipping away from one mode of existence into another. A slow transition where the world you trust dissolves and something else, something less stable, less predictable, begins to take its place. And all of this happens every single night, so routinely, so smoothly, that you almost never stop to question how strange it really is. If you watch your sleep closely, not from the inside, but through measurements, you begin to see a pattern that is far from simple. What feels like one continuous block of rest is actually a repeating structure, almost like a rhythm your brain follows throughout the night. Roughly every 90 minutes, your brain completes a cycle. Not perfectly, not like a machine, but consistently enough that scientists can map it. And within each cycle, your mind moves through distinct states, each with its own purpose, its own style of activity, and its own effect on how you think and feel the next day. At the beginning of the cycle, you enter light sleep. This is the fragile stage where you are no longer fully connected to the outside world, but not completely gone either. A small sound can wake you. A slight disturbance can pull you back. Your thoughts start losing structure here. They don't fully disappear, but they stop behaving in a controlled, logical way. It's like the edges of your awareness begin to blur. Then, gradually, you move into deep sleep. This is where things become quiet in a very real physical sense. The electrical activity in your brain slows down into large, steady waves. If you could see it, it would look less like fast chatter and more like a slow, synchronized movement. This is not the mind thinking. It's the mind stabilizing itself. In this state, your connection to the external world is at its weakest. You are difficult to wake, and more importantly, you are not really experiencing anything in the way you do when awake or dreaming. There are no vivid stories, no sense of time passing. If someone asked you what you experienced during deep sleep, the honest answer would be nothing. And yet, this nothing is incredibly important. During this stage, your brain is doing physical work. Waste products that build up during the day are cleared away. Neural connections, tiny links between brain cells, are adjusted. Some are strengthened, others are weakened. It's less like thinking and more like maintenance at the smallest level. A useful way to picture this is to imagine your brain as a workspace that becomes cluttered during the day. Every thought, every experience leaves traces. Tools are used and left out. Materials pile up. Deep sleep is when everything is slowly put back into order. Not perfectly, but enough to keep the system functional. Without this process, the effects become obvious very quickly. Your thinking becomes slower. Your reactions become less precise. Your emotions become harder to control. It's not just that you feel tired. Your ability to function as a coherent mind starts to break down. Then, after spending time in this deep, quiet state, your brain begins to shift again. Activity starts to increase. The slow waves give way to faster patterns. And eventually, you enter a completely different mode, one that almost looks like wakefulness from the outside, but feels entirely different from the inside. This is the stage where your mind becomes active again, but in a very unusual way. Your body remains still, disconnected from your intentions. While your brain begins constructing experiences internally, you are no longer processing the external world. Instead, the mind turns inward, generating its own version of reality. What's important here is not just that these stages exist, but that they repeat. Again and again, throughout the night, your brain cycles through light sleep, deep sleep, and more active phases. Each cycle slightly different from the last. Early in the night, deep sleep dominates. Later, the more active, dream-filled stages become longer. So sleep is not a single state, it is a structured process, a continuous movement between different modes of operation. And each mode contributes something essential, whether it's stabilizing the physical brain, reorganizing information, or generating internal experiences that we still don't fully understand. What seems like rest is actually a carefully balanced system. One that your brain runs every night without your awareness, quietly maintaining the conditions that make your waking life possible. Now consider the part of sleep that feels the most vivid, the most memorable, and at the same time, the most confusing dreams. You wake up and sometimes you remember fragments, a conversation that never happened, a place that doesn't exist, a sequence of events that made perfect sense at the time but collapses the moment you try to explain it. And yet, while you were inside it, it felt completely real. This is where things begin to get difficult to explain, even with all the tools of modern science. We know that dreams mostly occur during a stage of sleep called rapid eye movement sleep, often shortened to REM sleep. During this stage, your brain becomes highly active again. If you were to look at brain activity alone, without any context, you might think the person is awake. The patterns are fast, complex, and energetic. But at the same time, something unusual happens. Your body is almost completely paralyzed. Signals from the brain that would normally control your muscles are blocked. Your eyes may move rapidly, hence the name, but your body remains still. It's as if the brain has intentionally disconnected itself from physical action. This creates a strange situation. Your mind is active, generating experiences, but your body cannot respond to them. You are, in a sense, inside a closed simulation. Now, what exactly is this simulation doing? One idea is that dreams are the brain's way of processing memories. During the day, you experience far more than you can fully understand in real time. Conversations, emotions, sensory details, all of it gets recorded in some form. But it's not organized yet. During sleep, especially in REM, the brain seems to revisit these fragments, not in a neat, ordered way, but in a loose, associative manner. It pulls pieces from different times, different places and combines them. That's why in a dream, a familiar person might appear in an unfamiliar setting. Or an event from your past might merge with something that happened just yesterday. The brain is not replaying reality, it is reshaping it. You can think of it like this: instead of storing exact recordings, your mind is constantly editing and recombining information, trying to extract patterns, meaning, or emotional balance. Another idea is that dreams function like a kind of simulation environment. Imagine a pilot training in a flight simulator. The goal is not to recreate reality perfectly, but to expose the pilot to different scenarios, including unlikely or extreme ones, in a safe space. Dreams may be doing something similar. They allow the brain to test situations, social interactions, fears, unexpected events without real-world consequences. In this sense, even the strangest dreams might serve a purpose, even if we don't fully understand what that purpose is. But here's where it becomes more puzzling. Dreams do not follow the logical rules you rely on when you're awake. Time can jump forward or backward, because an effect can break down. You might be in one place and suddenly, without transition, you're somewhere else entirely. And the most interesting part is, you usually don't question it. This happens because the part of your brain responsible for critical thinking and self-awareness is less active during REM sleep. The system that normally says, "this doesn't make sense," is quieter, so whatever the brain generates is accepted as reality in that moment. Which leads to a deeper question. If your mind can create an entire world that feels real without input from the outside, then what exactly is the difference between that and waking experience? When you're awake, you trust your senses to tell you what is real. When you're dreaming, those same systems are generating the experience internally. In both cases, what you experience is constructed by the brain. The only difference is the source of the input, and even that difference is not always as clear as it seems. So dreams are not just random noise, and they are not fully understood stories either. They are something in between, a process where memory, emotion, and imagination interact in ways we are still trying to figure out. They show us in a very direct way that the mind does not simply reflect reality. It builds it. Now let's consider one of the strangest and most unsettling aspects of sleep, the question of who is experiencing all of this. When you are dreaming, the world feels real. You are interacting with people, reacting to events, thinking, sometimes even solving problems, but all within a landscape that exists only in your mind. The boundaries between what is onside and outside dissolve completely, and yet, during the dream, you do not question it. You assume it is real. This leads to a profound question. How do you know that your waking experience is any different? After all, in dreams, your brain creates perceptions of sound, sight, touch, and emotion without external input. It builds an entire reality internally. You feel joy, fear, confusion, love, anger, all generated from memory and imagination. The only reason you consider waking life to be real is that your senses are now gathering information from the external world in a consistent way. But the experience itself is constructed by your brain moment by moment. Even in waking life, most of what you perceive is filtered and interpreted. Your brain decides what is important, what is background noise, and what fits into the coherent narrative you call reality. Sleep and dreams in particular simply expose how malleable and constructed that narrative is. If your brain can make you believe in an entire world while paralyzed in your bed, then waking reality might be just another carefully curated simulation. Only one that happens to be shared by billions of other brains. Memory is another key player in this process. Sleep doesn't just create dreams, it rewrites the past. During REM and deep sleep, your brain reviews experiences, strengthens some memories, and weakens others. But it does not merely store facts like a hard drive, it edits them. It adjusts emotional weight, connects events, and sometimes even invents details to make patterns more coherent. By the time you wake, your memories are subtly altered from the raw events that occurred. You might feel certain experiences were vivid or significant, when in fact your mind has amplified or reshaped them. Sleep demonstrates that your sense of history, what you think you remember, is an ongoing construction, not a fixed record. There is also a curious functional aspect to this. Dreams may allow your mind to practice scenarios, to process emotions safely, and to simulate possibilities without risk. You might confront fears, rehearse conversations, or explore environments that never exist outside your imagination. It is as if your mind is running internal experiments to maintain emotional and cognitive balance. And it does all of this while your body remains still, conserving energy, repairing itself, and maintaining life. The mental and physical systems are cooperating, yet operating under different rules. The mind's ability to construct realities and reorganize itself while asleep highlights a fundamental mystery: consciousness is not continuous. During deep sleep, there is no awareness, no self-reflection, no you observing. And yet, when you wake, the sense of self reappears seamlessly, as if nothing had changed. Who was the observer while there was no observation? Who experienced the dreams, if not the self you recognize upon waking? The discontinuity challenges the assumption that the self is a constant entity, suggesting instead that it may be more like a recurring pattern recreated and maintained by the brain each time consciousness resumes. Sleep, in this sense, is not just rest. It is a laboratory of consciousness. It reveals the fragility, malleability, and constructed nature of your perception, identity, and memory. It exposes the hidden processes that allow you to experience a coherent reality, showing that the you who navigates the world is not a single, unbroken observer, but a constantly recreated phenomenon. The realization is unsettling but illuminating. Sleep demonstrates that reality, memory, and selfhood are not absolute. They are emergent, temporary, and entirely dependent on the ongoing work of your brain, work that happens quietly while you are not even aware of it. During sleep, one of the most remarkable processes your brain performs is memory consolidation, a kind of invisible editing that shapes not only what you remember, but how you feel about it. Memory is not like a video recording stored on a hard drive. It is more like a constantly evolving story, a set of threads that your mind weaves together, discarding some details, emphasizing others, and linking experiences in ways that make sense to the brain, even if they do not exactly reflect reality. Sleep is the stage where much of this work happens. Deep sleep plays a critical role in strengthening memories that are factual, spatial, and procedural. Skills you practiced, facts you learned, sequences you memorized, these all get stabilized during this stage. Your brain selectively reinforces neural connections, making some pathways stronger and more efficient. It is as if your mind is rehearsing patterns and solidifying what is useful, while allowing less relevant or redundant information to fade. Without this process, even small tasks can feel more difficult, reaction slower, and comprehension weaker. Over time, the accumulation of unprocessed experiences can impair your ability to function effectively. REM sleep, the stage associated with vivid dreaming, has a different but equally important effect. It helps process emotional experiences and integrate them with existing knowledge. It allows you to confront intense feelings or complex situations in a safe environment, often by blending them into dreams that are abstract, symbolic, or entirely fantastical. During this stage, your brain also reorganizes associative networks, making connections between seemingly unrelated ideas. This may explain why insights, creativity, or sudden moments often emerge after sleep. Your mind is not idle. It is reorganizing and experimenting with the material of your waking life in ways that are subtle but profound. Think of your memories like a library that receives thousands of books each day. Without order, the books pile up, pages overlap, and finding anything becomes nearly impossible. Sleep is the librarian who organizes labels, and sometimes even rewrites the books to make sure that the most important stories are accessible and coherent. In this process, the librarian also removes unnecessary clutter and ensures that emotional context is properly integrated. The result is a memory system that is functional, adaptive, and capable of supporting conscious thought and decision-making in waking life. Another aspect of memory during sleep is selective forgetting. This is not a flaw, but a feature. Your brain actively weakens connections that are deemed less important, which helps prevent mental overload. It preserves efficiency by prioritizing patterns that matter, keeping the mind agile and focused. Forgetting, in this sense, is not a loss but a refinement, a way of making room for new experiences and insights. Sleep also illustrates that your perception of self and continuity depends on memory. The you who wakes up in the morning is partly the result of what your brain has retained, strengthened, and edited while you were unconscious. Each night, the brain effectively rewrites a part of your identity, integrating recent experiences, regulating emotions, and preparing the mind to navigate the world again. Without this nightly reconstruction, the continuity of self would falter. This process shows that your sense of reality, of identity, and of the past is not fixed. It is continuously shaped, even altered, while you are unaware. Sleep reveals that consciousness is a dynamic construct maintained by complex neural operations, editing experiences, and sculpting memory. It is not a passive state, but an active workshop where the mind redefines itself, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically, so that the person who wakes is coherent, functional, and ready to engage with the next day. In this light, sleep is less about rest and more about the careful, ongoing creation of the self and the reality it perceives. It is an invisible process, but without it, the continuity of thought, identity, and experience would unravel. It is a reminder that who you are is not static. It is a constantly edited phenomenon emerging from the delicate, mysterious work of your sleeping brain. As we move deeper into the mystery of sleep, one of the most fascinating aspects is how little we actually understand it. Despite decades of research, scientists still struggle to explain why consciousness transforms the way it does during sleep. We can measure brain waves, track chemical changes, and map activity in different regions, but these tools only show us what happens, not why. The deeper questions about awareness, identity, and the nature of experience remain elusive. We know that sleep is vital for life. Animals across the spectrum engage in it, and deprivation has clear consequences. Cognitive functions decline, emotions destabilize, and physical health deteriorates when sleep is insufficient. Yet, the subjective experience of consciousness itself, what it feels like to exist while sleeping, is something science can only infer, not directly observe. We know parts of the brain deactivate, some become highly active, and neurotransmitters shift dramatically. But the emergent property we call the self still eludes explanation. Sleep also challenges our conventional ideas about continuity and identity. During deep sleep, consciousness seems to vanish entirely. There is no awareness, no reflection, no subjective I. And yet, when you awaken, the self reappears seamlessly as if nothing had happened. This discontinuity is deeply puzzling. It suggests that the sense of a continuous self, the feeling that you exist uninterrupted, is actually an illusion maintained by the brain. What we think of as I is not a constant entity, but a recurring phenomenon, reconstructed and reassembled each time consciousness resumes. Dreaming introduces an additional layer of complexity. In REM sleep, the brain generates highly vivid, emotionally charged experiences. Your mind creates entire worlds, interactions, and narratives internally. You perceive, feel, and react to events that do not exist outside your imagination. The part of the brain responsible for critical judgment is less active, which is why bizarre or impossible scenarios feel entirely real. This reveals that the mind is capable of constructing a fully immersive reality without any external input, and it raises questions about the reliability of all experience. If your brain can simulate reality so convincingly while you are asleep, waking reality may also be a carefully constructed simulation, only one that happens to be externally reinforced. Memory processes during sleep add yet another dimension. The brain consolidates experiences, strengthens important neural connections, and prunes irrelevant information. Emotional experiences are integrated, often through symbolic or abstract representations in dreams. Memories are not stored like files on a disk. They are edited, reinterpreted, and sometimes rewritten. This nightly reconstruction means that the person who wakes is subtly different from the person who went to sleep, even if they feel continuous. Sleep is essentially a workshop where identity, cognition, and perception are actively maintained and optimized. Despite all these insights, the precise reason for sleep's effects on consciousness remains mysterious. We can describe the mechanics, but the subjective nature of awareness, the fact that there is something it is like to sleep and to dream, escapes full scientific understanding. Sleep shows us that consciousness is not a simple, unbroken stream. It is discontinuous, malleable, and emergent, dependent on the complex interplay of neural systems, chemicals, and patterns of activity. What feels like a continuous self is really the product of processes that are largely hidden from view. Sleep confronts us with a profound truth. Our awareness of reality is limited by the very system that produces it. Even the most intimate experience we have, our own mind, is constructed, edited, and temporarily suspended without our knowledge. It is a reminder that reality, identity, and consciousness are not fixed, but dynamic phenomena that emerge from underlying processes we barely understand. When you reflect on sleep, one of the most profound and unsettling aspects is the question of where you, or when consciousness disappears. During deep sleep, there is no awareness, no subjective experience, and yet the systems of the brain continue working tirelessly. You do not perceive the passage of time. You do not interact with your environment, and you do not think in the ways you do while awake. And yet, in the morning, the sense of self returns seamlessly, as if it had never been gone. This raises a deep philosophical and scientific puzzle. If there is no observer during sleep, then what exactly is the self and how is it maintained? Consciousness, as we experience it, may be less continuous than it feels. The perception of a stable, unbroken identity is likely an emergent property, created by the brain each time awareness resumes. Sleep provides an extreme example of this phenomenon. The brain effectively pauses subjective experience, maintaining essential functions while suspending the self. During this pause, neural processes continue to operate, repairing damage, consolidating memories, and regulating emotions. But there is no subjective observer witnessing these processes. The self is temporarily absent, yet the system is still functioning, still processing, still laying the groundwork for future consciousness. Dreams, in particular, highlight the malleability of the mind and the self. In REM sleep, the brain generates complex, emotionally vivid experiences that feel real while they are happening. People, places, and events appear, interact, and evolve within a constructed internal reality. You respond to them as if they were external, and your brain treats these experiences as meaningful. The part of the brain responsible for logical analysis is less active, which allows absurd, impossible, or contradictory events to feel normal. Your mind accepts them without question. In this sense, dreams demonstrate that your perception of reality is a construction, one that can exist entirely independent of the external world. Memory consolidation during sleep further reinforces this idea. The brain does not simply record and replay experiences. It edits, integrates, and organizes them, selectively strengthening important neural connections and weakening or discarding irrelevant information. Emotional experiences are recalibrated, and associations are created between ideas that were previously disconnected. By the time you wake, your memories have already been subtly rewritten. The you that wakes is not identical to the you that went to sleep. It has been reshaped by unconscious processes, yet the continuity of self feels uninterrupted. Sleep shows that identity is a dynamic construct, continually edited and maintained without conscious awareness. Sleep also reveals the brain's capacity for generating reality internally. During dreaming, the mind constructs entire scenarios without external input. Perception, emotion, and narrative are all produced from memory, imagination, and neural patterns. This demonstrates that the brain does not merely passively perceive the world. It actively creates the world we experience. In sleep, this creative construction continues even in the absence of conscious observation. The system operates independently of the observer, maintaining processes that will later support consciousness, memory, and emotional stability. This understanding challenges the notion of a stable, permanent self. The continuity you perceive in waking life is not guaranteed. It is a product of ongoing neural activity that persists even when subjective experience ceases. Sleep makes it clear that identity is emergent, temporary, and reconstructed repeatedly. Your existence as a conscious observer is not an uninterrupted thread, but a recurring phenomenon, dependent on processes largely hidden from your awareness. It suggests that the mind is both fragile and resilient. Fragile in that consciousness can disappear nightly, yet resilient in that it reconstructs the self so seamlessly that the absence goes unnoticed. Sleep teaches us that the most familiar thing, the I, we take for granted is not a static entity. It is a process, a pattern maintained and recreated by the brain every night, a dynamic phenomenon emerging from hidden, complex, and still largely mysterious biological mechanisms. In this light, the self is not a permanent fixture of reality, but a temporary manifestation of a system that continues to work even in its absence. When you consider the full cycle of sleep, one of the most striking realizations is how profoundly it reshapes the way we perceive reality. Sleep demonstrates that what we take for granted as a continuous, stable experience of the world is actually a fragile construction, dependent entirely on the ongoing activity of our brain. Every night, this system undergoes a complex transformation. Deep sleep temporarily suspends awareness. REM sleep creates vivid, internally generated experiences. Memory consolidation edits the past and integrates emotional patterns. By morning, the sense of self and continuity appears intact, yet it is subtly different, subtly reconstructed, and subtly optimized. This reconstruction challenges our assumptions about identity. We like to believe that we exist as a single unbroken observer, but sleep reveals that the self is emergent and discontinuous. During deep sleep, consciousness effectively disappears. There is no internal narrative, no subjective awareness, and no active reflection. Yet the brain continues operating, repairing neural circuits, regulating hormones, and processing information. It is a system working invisibly, maintaining the conditions that allow the self to reappear seamlessly. The continuity we experience is not evidence of an unchanging identity, but of a biological process that recreates it every time consciousness resumes. Dreams provide another perspective on the nature of reality. During REM sleep, the brain generates experiences that feel indistinguishably real while they occur. We interact with people, navigate environments, experience emotions, and react to events entirely constructed from memory, imagination, and neural patterns. The part of the brain responsible for logic and critical thinking is suppressed, allowing impossible events to be accepted without question. Time, identity, and causality can bend or collapse entirely. Yet, within the dream, the mind treats the experience as coherent. This demonstrates that the sense of reality is flexible and constructed, not a fixed reflection of the external world. The waking world is also a construction only reinforced by consistent sensory input. Sleep exposes the processes that underlie it, showing that consciousness is a creative act rather than a passive observation. Memory consolidation during sleep further illustrates the brain's role in shaping perception. Experiences from the day are reviewed, reorganized, and integrated into existing mental frameworks. Emotional experiences are balanced and contextualized, important patterns are strengthened, and irrelevant or distracting information is weakened or discarded. Memory is not merely stored, it is actively edited. By the time you awaken, your understanding of the past has been subtly rewritten. This editing process ensures cognitive efficiency, emotional stability, and adaptability. But it also means that the self you inhabit each day is a product of ongoing neural sculpting rather than a fixed entity. Sleep, therefore, is not simply a state of rest, it is a dynamic process in which consciousness is paused, constructed, and renewed. It allows the brain to maintain its functions, process experiences, and rehearse responses to future situations while suspending subjective awareness. It demonstrates that the line between reality and imagination, self and process, being and non-being, is far thinner than it appears. The person you are while awake is not a static observer, but a recurring phenomenon, a pattern emerging from complex, hidden mechanisms that continue to operate even when you are unaware. In understanding sleep this way, reality itself becomes a more fluid concept. The familiar world, the continuity of self, and the sense of personal identity are not absolute. They are emergent, maintained by the quiet, invisible work of the brain. Every night, sleep reconstructs the mind, and with it, the very lens through which reality is perceived. What seems permanent and stable is, in truth, an ongoing miracle of biology, a temporary manifestation of processes that are hidden from awareness but essential to existence. Through sleep, we are reminded that consciousness, memory, and identity are not fixed truths, but phenomena continually emerging, disappearing, and reassembling in a rhythm that quietly defines our lives.